Story number 1. I was driving home from my job at the diner, the kind of place that looks like it's stuck in the 50s, with milkshakes and fries that could bring a smile to even the grumpiest trucker's face. My mind was on autopilot, thinking about the mountain of homework I was ignoring when it happened. Out of nowhere, a figure appeared in the road. It was like they materialized from the fog itself. I slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. The thud was sickening. For a moment, I just sat there, heart racing, hands shaking on the wheel. I had hit someone. Panicked, I jumped out of the car. The fog made it hard to see, but I found them lying on the ground, groaning. They were alive, thank God, but hurt bad. I couldn't just leave them there. But calling the cops? My job was hanging by a thread as it was. Getting the police involved could mean the end of it. No, I had to get them to the hospital myself. He was a young guy, probably not much older than me. Getting him into the car was a struggle, him moaning in pain with every move. The drive to the hospital was a blur, my mind racing with what could happen next. Would he be okay? Would I get in trouble for not calling an ambulance? The fog seemed to get thicker as we drove, the world outside the car disappearing into a white void. We finally got to the hospital and I rushed to get help. Nurses and a doctor came quickly, taking him away on a stretcher. They asked me questions, but I couldn't focus. My mind was stuck on the accident, replaying it over and over. That's when things started to get weird. I waited for hours, pacing the hospital corridors, waiting for any news. But when I asked, no one seemed to know about the guy I brought in. Confused, I described him to the nurse at the front desk, but she just gave me a puzzled look. According to her, no one fitting that description had been admitted tonight. I felt like I was losing my mind. I knew I brought him here. I saw the doctors take him away. Desperate for some answers, I decided to check the parking lot to see if my car had any clues. Maybe I was just imagining things, but my car wasn't how I left it. The passenger side door was open, and there was no sign of the guy or any blood. It was like the accident never happened. I was sure I wasn't dreaming it. The fog still hung heavy in the air, adding to the surreal feeling. I decided to drive back to where the accident happened. Maybe I'd find something there. But the road was empty. No sign of an accident. No traces of blood. Nothing. It was like the earth swallowed up any evidence that something had happened. Feeling like a crazy person, I drove around aimlessly, trying to piece together what was happening. That's when I noticed a car following me. Every turn I made, it was right behind me. My heart started racing again. Was this related to the guy I hit? Was I being paranoid? I tried to lose them, but they were relentless. Finally, in a moment of desperation, I pulled over. The car behind me stopped, and two men got out, walking towards me. I braced myself, ready for a confrontation, but they didn't attack me. Instead, they started talking about how lucky I was to have found them. They said they were part of a group that helped people in trouble, people who had accidents like mine. All they needed was a little compensation for their services, and they'd make any problem disappear. It hit me then. This was a scam. They targeted lone drivers on foggy nights, staging accidents to extort money. The guy I hit must have been part of it, playing the role of the injured pedestrian. And now, they were trying to scare me into paying up. I refused, of course. I told them I knew what they were doing and that I wouldn't give them a dime. They didn't like that. The conversation turned threatening quickly. I realized I was in real danger. These guys weren't playing around. Story number 2. It was just another Friday night and I was hustling, delivering pizzas in the city's outskirts where the lights don't shine as bright and the streets know more stories than they should. My name's Luis, and this gig is my ticket through college, or at least that's the plan. The night was dragging on and I was ready to call it quits when the last order of the night pinged on my phone. The address was way out in the boonies, a place I hadn't delivered to before, but the tip was too good to pass up. I grabbed the pizza, jumped into my beat-up car, and followed the GPS into the darkness. The further I drove, the more isolated it felt, with only the moon for company. Finally, the GPS announced, "You've arrived." But all I saw were abandoned lots and a house that looked like it hadn't seen life in decades. No lights, no cars, no signs of anyone ordering pizza. Confused, I double-checked the address, thinking maybe I got it wrong. But no, it was the right place. I decided to call the number on the order, but it went straight to voicemail. That sinking feeling in my stomach told me something wasn't right. I should have left right then, but I figured maybe they were waiting inside, maybe a surprise party or something. So I grabbed the pizza and walked towards the dark house. Before I could even knock, I heard them. Footsteps, quick and quiet, coming from behind. I turned around and barely caught a glimpse of shadowy figures before a cloth bag was thrown over my head, and everything went dark. Panic didn't begin to describe it. My heart was racing, my mind screaming for me to get out, but my body wouldn't cooperate. They tied my hands and shoved me into a car. The ride was long, filled with turns and stops that disoriented me further. When the car finally stopped and they pulled me out, I could hear the distant sounds of city life, as if mocking my predicament. The bag was ripped from my head, and I squinted against the harsh light of a dimly lit warehouse. Surrounding me were faces I didn't know, young guys, not much older than me, with cold, hard eyes that didn't match their age. The leader, a guy with a scar running down his cheek, introduced himself as Marco. He didn't waste time on pleasantries, just dove straight into why I was there. It was a gang initiation, he said. They needed to prove themselves, and unfortunately for me, I was part of their test. My heart sank. I thought about my family, my little sister, how I was supposed to be the one who made it out, who made something of himself. And here I was, caught in a nightmare because I took one wrong delivery. They talked among themselves, making plans I didn't understand, laughing and joking as if I wasn't there, as if my life meant nothing to them. I was just a pawn in their game. The reality of my situation hit me hard. I wasn't going to get out of this by pleading or reasoning with them. These guys lived in a world where violence was currency, and I had nothing to offer. But I couldn't give up. I had to survive, not just for me, but for my family. So I watched and waited, looking for any opportunity. It came in a small moment, a brief distraction when one of them, a kid really, couldn't handle the tension and stepped outside. I could see the door was left ajar, a sliver of hope. I've never believed in miracles, but in that moment, I prayed for one. My hands, tied behind my back, were numb, but I managed to work them free, biting down on the panic and the pain. With the cloth around my wrists loosened, I waited for the right second, and then I made a run for it. The door, the dark alley beyond, the distant city lights, it all blurred together as I ran. I could hear shouts behind me, the thunder of footsteps chasing me. I didn't look back. I couldn't. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but fear was a powerful motivator. I don't know how long I ran, but eventually, the sounds of pursuit faded. I found myself in a part of the city I recognized, near the downtown area, alive with people and lights. I collapsed near a bus stop, my body giving out now that safety was within reach. Story number 3. The night was just like any other in the sprawling city, with neon lights flickering in the distance and the constant hum of the urban symphony. My name is Jin Ho, and I've been delivering pizzas for a few months now, using the gig to fill the gaps between my college classes. It's not much, but it keeps me busy and pays the bills. That night, my last delivery took me to the edge of the city, to a neighborhood that was unfamiliar, with houses that whispered secrets. The address led me to a house that seemed more shadow than structure, its windows dark, the garden wild and untamed. I hesitated at the gate, a sense of unease crawling up my spine. Still, a job's a job, and I pushed forward, pizza in hand. I rang the bell and waited, the silence around me stretching thin. No one answered. I rang again, my discomfort growing, when I noticed a slight movement behind the curtain of a ground floor window. A shadow, a shape. Someone was watching me. But as quickly as it appeared, it vanished, leaving me to question if my eyes were playing tricks on me. Deciding to leave the pizza at the doorstep, I scribbled a quick note, my fingers fumbling in the dim light. As I turned to leave, a chill ran down my spine, the feeling of eyes on my back unmistakable. I quickened my pace, eager to leave the eerie quiet of the neighborhood behind. Over the next few days, I tried to shake off the unease of that night, but the feeling of being watched clung to me, a persistent shadow at the edge of my vision. It wasn't until I started finding the photographs that I realized my unease was justified. The first photograph was tucked under my windshield wiper one morning, a simple shot of me delivering the pizza that night. At first, I thought it was a prank, but the pit in my stomach grew as more photographs appeared. Each one showed me either at work, on campus, or just walking down the street, always alone, and always with the feeling that someone was just out of the frame, watching. The notes started soon after, cryptic messages written in a jagged script that made my skin crawl. "I see you," one said. "You can't hide," said another. Each message was a violation, a reminder that my privacy had been breached by unseen eyes. I tried to convince myself it was just a twisted joke, but the photographs kept coming, each one closer, more personal. I started to see him then, the watcher. A shadowy figure, always at a distance, his face obscured. He was at the corner when I left for work, outside the restaurant when I finished my shifts, near my apartment when I returned home at night. His presence was suffocating, a constant threat that kept me looking over my shoulder, jumping at shadows. I became paranoid, seeing potential danger in every face, every unexpected sound. My life, once so ordinary, had turned into a maze of fear and suspicion. Determined to confront my stalker, I waited for him one night, my nerves wound tight. But he never showed. Instead, another photograph was left for me, this time of me waiting. The frustration and fear on my face clear even in the dim light. The message on the back was simple: "You can't catch me." The realization hit me hard then. This wasn't going to end on its own. I needed to find out who was behind this, why they were tormenting me. My search led me down a rabbit hole of possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. Was it someone I knew? A faceless enemy driven by motives I couldn't begin to understand? My quest for answers became an obsession, every moment spent looking for clues, for any lead that might help me unravel the identity of my watcher. The strain took its toll, leaving me exhausted, frayed at the edges. But I couldn't stop, not when every photograph, every note was a reminder of how vulnerable I was.